Góðan daginn, hvað segir þú gott? Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the first thing that comes to mind when people talk about why Icelandic is such a difficult language. But before I get into this, I need to first add a disclaimer saying I am not fluent in Icelandic. I'm not a for realsies linguist, so take all this with a couple heaping teaspoons of salt. I am learning Icelandic, so I know some of the stuff, but yeah, by no means am I an expert. Also, all of this is going to be coming from the perspective of native English speakers. Of course, when you talk about languages, specifically how difficult a language is, that's always relative to the language you speak. So, of course, if you speak Danish or Norwegian or especially Faroese, Icelandic is going to be much easier than if you are an English speaker. So, number one, what we're going to talk about in terms of what makes Icelandic seem so scary is its orthography. Orthography being a super fancy words for how it's written. So, for the most part, Icelandic has the Latin alphabet. You know, you'll recognize A, B, D, E, F, G. That's all normal. But there are a couple symbols that Icelandic has that English doesn't have. First being the letter F. F, or in Icelandic, eða, is the TH sound. It makes the th sound, like in words eth, or ath, like in infinitive forms of verbs. Once you see it though, once you know what it is, not scary. Second super scary letter is thorn, or in Icelandic, thorn. Thorn also makes the TH sound, but tends to be in words in different places. Like you basically would never start a word with F, but you can very often start words with thorn. Now, interesting thing about thorn, but despite looking scary, is the fact that we used to have it in Old English. We used to have F, too. We used to have it in Old English. The interesting story with thorn is that when we started to print stuff, we didn't have it on the printing presses to print thorn, so they would often use the letter Y as a substitute for thorn. And at the time, people knew what this was, they could handle it, but now we don't see Y in old printings and recognize it as a TH sound. This is, of course, where ye old comes from in I don't know, signs, or anytime someone wants to make something look like it's old-timey, ye old, right? Except ye, the Y, was a thorn, so it would have been the old. No one ever went around saying ye in the history of English, modern, middle, or old English. Ye wasn't a thing, no one said it. The only other really scary words are this guy here, which is like mishmash of A and E, and it just makes the sound I. That's the nice thing about Icelandic orthography, is that it's pretty darn consistent. And then also, this guy, it's close to the like short U sound, like in my name, Justin, but not quite. So, when you put all these strange characters together, it can make Icelandic look scary and intimidating, but really, for the most part, they're basic sounds that exist in English. It's actually letters that look similar to English that are the scariest. So, let's talk now about what really makes Icelandic words scary, when you hear them at least, and that's Icelandic phonology. Phonology being a fancy word for the sounds a language makes. It's more complicated than that, but that definition will suffice. So, phonology, of course, being like phonics, phonetic, having to do with sound. It's the sound, the basic sound blocks that a language makes. In some ways, Icelandic is similar to English. It has the TH sound, which is not that common, actually, in languages globally. And specifically, Icelandic has both the voiced and voiceless TH sound. Voicing in phonology deals with whether or not your vocal cords do anything. So we have voiced th, these, and we also have unvoiced th, like thistle. The only difference between th and th is whether or not your vocal cords do anything. So in that sense, they're similar. One difference that Icelandic has that English doesn't have is an unvoiced L sound. So consonants tend to come in voiced and unvoiced pairs. S and Z, S and Z, D and T, D and T, P and B, P and B. We have only, though, a voiced L. So, let, loose, play. The L is voiced. Icelandic has an L, though, that is almost universally unvoiced. You can try this by making an extended L sound, and then dropping out your vocal cords, to, and it's breathy. So, for example, when you say hello to a woman, you might say sæl. Even though it's written with an L, you would not voice it sæl, like you would in English. It's sæl, with no voicing. Another interesting case where Icelandic does something without voicing is with the letter N. Icelandic is one of the only languages with an unvoiced nasal. Now, a nasal consonant like N has sound going out your nose, but our N is voiced. You're both going through your nose and your vocal cords are working. Icelandic has an unvoiced N, or a voiceless N. And you can try this. You make the N sound and then you turn off your vocal cords. Is basically just breathing through your nose. But Icelandic does this. For example, the word water in Icelandic, V-A-T-N, is pronounced vatn. So the N is voiceless. This is actually the case with, for example, the Icelandic name Bjorn, which in English we say Bjorn, but anytime you have RN, it's more like D voiceless nasal. So Bjorn with an Icelandic pronunciation is more like Bjorn, with that weird, breathy nasal sound, voiceless nasal sound, which to an English-speaking ear is really, really weird. Possibly the most complicated or strange, striking sound in Icelandic is anytime you have two L's sitting before a vowel or at the end of a word. And this is probably the major feature that makes Eyjafjallajökull so scary. It's similar to the voiceless L, but it's more, it's got a little more of a punch to it. So really, how I've explained it to people is trying to build up like you're going to do the letter T. So you build up that pressure, except instead of letting the air go forward out of your mouth, you're going to let it go out the sides of your mouth. So you're going to keep the tip of your tongue glued to the top of your mouth, like for T, but it's going to stay there, and the air is going to go out the sides. Tla, tla. So that's when you say hello to a man, you say sæll, and you make that little sound. So in Eyjafjallajökull, you have two of those, fjalla and kull. I'm not going to go too deep into Eyjafjallajökull yet because I'm going to come back to it when we talk about compound words. Because once you understand how compound words work with Icelandic, the scariness of a big, giant word like Eyjafjallajökull gets a lot less scary. So again, this is not everything. There's far more subtlety to it, but because I don't want to make 6 5-hour videos to go over it, not to mention I'm not the expert, I'm going to stop here. I just wanted to give a brief overview of, I think, what are the most scary and not off-putting, but disarming elements of the language. Next time, we'll delve into probably the compound words in Icelandic and why you get those monstrously giant words like you do in German. So, yeah, bless.